Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee with the Critters, where I usually live stream every Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, unless otherwise noted. And today is one of those days. You guys have been hearing me talk about this for at least 4 weeks. I've got the guests of the I Know Dino, the Big Dinosaur podcast on with me today, Garret and Sabrina. But before we get started with that, for those that may be new, welcome. My name is Laura Joseph, owner of the Animal Behavior Center. We're an international educational center where we teach people all over the world how to empower animals and the people that care for them. We do that through our live streaming services, and I focus on the science of behavior, applied behavior analysis using B.F. Skinner's laws of behavior, training exotics. You can find out more about the work that I do here on our website, theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. You can also email me directly at Laura, Lara, at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. A couple extra things before we get started. You can find out more information about our services, our live streaming memberships, our webinars, our events, on our website and on our Facebook page. Pay attention to the events because we've got two big ones coming up. Let's see if you can also join our email newsletter list, which if you're here, you have received the email about today's live stream. I'm trying something new with this app, so I don't know what this is going to take me to. I believe this is the last slide. It is. Pay attention to my blog. I'm starting to write on the blog again, and those that have been following the work that I do know that I train exotics, and I'm getting ready to post a blog about a species of animal I am very fascinated with, and that is the alligator. So I'm going to update you on my training with Bruce, the American alligator, Elvis and Priscilla, the larger ones that I've been training for several years. So good morning, or not good morning, sorry, good afternoon, everybody. I see Eva and Beth. Oops, I meant to hide that. April, Stephanie, Kim. Hello, everybody. I know you guys have been waiting for this episode. I've shared this with a lot of different people as well. And so now I am going to go ahead and bring on our guests. I call them the dynamic duo. That's what I've been calling you. Garret, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Garret and Sabrina. Here they are. You're coming on in 1 second. There you go.
Hello.
Are you guys okay with this?
Oh, yes.
I'm just going to adjust my seating slightly.
Okay, I can try to manipulate the screen a little bit.
We're good. We're used to spending lots of time up close and personal.
Yeah.
I know. And I was thinking today, I was like, when did I first reach out to you? I think it was last September, and you couldn't because
we just had a baby.
Yes.
So it's a little hard to do live streams.
Yeah. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm just going to read a quick little bio about you guys. Garret and Sabrina are a husband and wife team and the dinosaur experts who host the podcast I Know Dino. They are currently celebrating 9 years of podcasting and have nearly, and we were discussing this right before the live stream, possibly already over 500 episodes available at iknowdino.com or wherever you get your podcasts. So I know we were also talking about how I was talking to my sister about this last night, and she's like, how could they possibly have this many podcasts? You guys have been doing this for 9 years. I've been listening to you for, I would say, at least 3 years.
Wow, thank you.
About 3 years ago was when I first found you. So thank you so much for coming on today. And let's start with, do you guys want to tell a little bit about yourselves and how you got into this? What I want to know.
Sure. I think like a lot of people who love dinosaurs, we love dinosaurs as kids. And for us, I mean, Jurassic Park was obviously it was huge for a lot of people. A lot of people who are paleontologists today are paleontologists or got into it because of Jurassic Park. For us, it was also like Land Before Time and probably a few others. There's so many.
A lot of books.
Yeah.
There were a lot of books that really got me super into dinosaurs. Which is the problem with books is they don't pronounce anything. So then you're just like making up whatever pronunciation, which is still a problem. And just a quick aside, we've asked some people who name the dinosaurs, like, how do you pronounce that? And they go, I don't know. It's like a thing based on Latin combined with Greek and then like anglicized and like, it's just, whatever. As long as people know what you're trying to say.
When you guys say the names of these, it just rolls off your tongue. I was like, do they sit down and practice this for like an hour before they get started?
Well, we can
There's
edit.
a lot of, we can edit, but there is a lot of practice and a lot of editing.
Yeah, we'll correct each other like, oh, we usually say it that way. And then like,
I do think there are episodes where if you go back, there's probably, we said it one way and then we learned another way to say it. And you might hear it said that way a few years later.
Yeah, especially if we like talk to somebody who's like the expert in that specific group of dinosaurs, we tend to say it the way they say it, even if it conflicts with like the way we've been saying it for years, just because it's like, well, they're kind of the experts. So I feel like we should say it that way.
Yes.
There was one I was listening. I thought what was the topic of your last podcast? It started with an O, wasn't it?
Oh, the Acrocanthosaurus? Is that the one?
That one. I was like, pause, and I kept trying to like pronounce it.
It is a mouthful.
They tend to have a lot of syllables too.
Yes.
But
so you guys are very funny in your podcast. I mean, you're extremely informative, very funny, very educational. Even like I listened to one a couple of days ago, you had a guest on talking about if dinosaurs lived today, what would they eat?
Oh, yes.
That was interesting.
Yes.
That was interesting. So anything more about your intro, how you got started in this before we start moving into this topic?
Sure. Yeah. So we loved them as kids and then probably got a little embarrassed by how much we liked them as teenagers. And, you kind of tamp it down for a little bit. But then... And it actually took a few years into dating, I think, until we both realized how much we liked dinosaurs. And we were living on the East Coast. We were able to visit the American Museum of Natural History in New York quite a bit. And we kept being drawn to the dinosaur halls and remembering how cool they are. And so we decided to start, it started off as a blog and kind of a place to keep track of dinosaur museums around the world, like an aspirational thing. We want to visit as many as we can.
We have a map that's still on there that now has several hundred museums on it.
Over 300 last time I looked. And that's we've gotten a lot of input from our community because there's no way for us to know about all of these.
They're hard to find, which is why we wanted to start that, because it was like you go to a city and then we would leave the city and we'd be like, there was a dinosaur museum there. Like, and we didn't know. So then if we could keep track of them on a map, it's like if we're driving somewhere and we happen to go by one, we can check beforehand.
Yeah, that's cool. You should sell that map.
It's free for.
Do you have it posted anywhere?
It's just what is it? iknowdino.com/dinosaur museums. There might be a hyphen in dinosaur museums.
I'll have to look it up. Go to iknowdino.com. It'll be like museums at the top.
Yeah, that's the easy way to get there.
That is, yeah. So then we realized how much we like dinosaurs, and we ended up having a dinosaur themed wedding. It was at a zoo, and we got the first, his name is Duncan. It was a person in one of those animatronic T-Rex costumes. So the head's animatronic. And we were Duncan's first wedding. And I would say all the adults loved Duncan, but the kids were a little bit weary.
Yeah, especially like a certain age.
Around 10 or so. They really...
It was very realistic.
Yes.
They said that they changed it over the years to make it look like I was smiling more, but it's still like a T-Rex. So it's got huge sharp teeth, and every time it opens its mouth, it looks like it's going to eat you because it's, its face is like 5 feet off the ground. So... But yeah, then we started the podcast shortly after we got married. So
yeah, we didn't want to stop talking about dinosaurs, so started that show.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so glad you did. We've got a lot of people on here. My sister just joined too, so she obviously got. Okay, so a lot of the people that follow the work that I do, I try to hide it, but I am horrible at hiding how fascinated I am with birds. And I train a lot of birds. I have a lot of birds. Do we want to start there?
Sure.
Sure. I mean,
Okay.
We're starting to get into birding too, but
yes. We're
Yay.
not.
Be careful. It's extremely addictive.
yeah.
I could see that. I could see that. I definitely have a lot to learn still about birds, but since birds came from dinosaurs, we're familiar with that aspect.
We got a starting point.
We've got, yeah.
Yeah. And where was I listening? Is it controversial now that Archaeopteryx was the first avian dinosaur found?
Is this an Archaeopteryx?
I think
should
that one's
check. Yeah, this
yeah,
is an
that's an
Archaeopteryx. We
Archaeopteryx.
got a
Here,
little,
hold
a
it
little
up.
display
Let's get it a little
Archaeopteryx. Oh yeah. Good job.
Yep. But yeah, it does look very bird-like.
There are multiple things with Archaeopteryx. One of them is there might be earlier. They call them paravians in the dinosaur world, which is basically like birds, and then like everything that evolved into birds are like closely related to birds. They call paravians. And there are other contenders for like the earliest bird. Like there's one called Anchiornis, which is pretty early. That means ancient bird, I believe. Archaeopteryx means ancient
wing.
feather or ancient wing, depending on what you do with the Latin. But the interesting thing about Archaeopteryx is if you look at it, its wings are kind of small compared to how huge its body is. And so it probably couldn't really fly like a bird. So the two competing hypotheses right now are, is it like a dinosaur that was, ancestors were running and it's evolving flight? Or is it like an ostrich where its ancestors were actually more bird-like and it evolved to be more flightless? And it's a very interesting debate because it's really hard to tell, obviously.
Right, because it's from Jurassic.
Yeah. And yeah, the only way, almost every time we're talking about this is like, well, we need more fossils. We'll find more fossils and that'll fill in the picture.
That's the story for almost any dinosaur mystery.
Yeah, but Archaeopteryx definitely is still one of the oldest bird relatives that we know for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that was when I started reading about, I bought, I can't remember what the audiobook was talking about Archaeopteryx, and maybe that's what I was listening to. I was listening to the audiobook, I think it's called Feathers. Yeah. So anyways, a little bit of a bird nerd here. So
Yes.
if you guys talk birds, I'm going to be just soaking it up.
I mean, I'm excited because we talk about birds a lot, but we know a lot more about we call them non-avian dinosaurs.
Right.
So the dinosaurs that aren't birds, because technically all birds are dinosaurs if you do it phylogenetically or like evolutionarily. So sometimes if someone's being really pedantic and you say the dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago, people go, no, they didn't. Birds are dinosaurs. They're still around. We're still in the age of the dinosaurs, which is great.
We like to joke they're just biding their time.
Yes.
Before they take over the world.
Yes. Yeah. I have a theory that gulls will re-inherit the earth. But there are other birds that are contenders, but I think gulls are pretty adaptable and are high on the list.
Yeah. And it shocks a lot of people when I tell them birds are dinosaurs, or when I talk about the raptors that I work with. People are like, raptors? Didn't they go extinct? And I was like, ooh, we get a lot of talking to do.
Yep. And the reason the dinosaurs are called raptors is because of the similarity to the raptor birds. Like they're named after the raptor birds. And that was before people really appreciated that dinosaurs were birds. So it's funny because there's a lot of that where people notice like there's a group of dinosaurs called ornithomimids, which means bird mimics.
Yeah, but they lived way before.
Yeah, and they didn't know that they were related at that time. They're just like, this looks a lot like a bird. We're just going to call them bird mimics because they're mimicking them because they look like them.
Well,
but
it's
then later on they realize like, oh wait, they're actually really closely related.
It's like even before people started doing the Linnaean system, the way we identify and name dinosaurs now. People all over the world were noticing tracks or bones or things like that, and they attribute it in some cases to giant birds, like the Emu Man, a story from Australia.
Do you know that story, the Emu Man?
No.
So there's this Aboriginal mythology of this. I can't remember the proper name for him, but
yeah, I always have to look it up.
They call him the Emu Man in English, and it's basically like they have these huge tracks. So like, I'm going to show a different example here. So this is the foot of a big predatory dinosaur.
But with the black background, you can see better.
Yeah, so it looks just like a bird foot. It's like the
Yeah.
same, basically, except it's like 2 feet long. And so they found a bunch of these fossilized trackways in the beach in Western Australia, and they had seen emu running around, so they figured this must be a huge emu foot.
Mhm.
And the mythology that they had was that this half emu, half man god was huge, like 50 feet tall, and like his bottom half was emu, and so he had these huge feet, and he was like this super important figure in their mythology. And it's that later on it turned out to be dinosaur tracks, but it's cool because they had noticed that connection between birds and dinosaurs way before like the highbrow scientists in England figured it out 200 years ago or 150 years ago.
That's pretty cool. No, I've never heard the story of the Emu Man. I'm going to have to write that down and look into it.
It's a cool one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when I saw your podcast come out on birds, I'm sure, I know you've had more than one, but there was one in particular. I think it was fascinating. It was fascinating.
This is probably the one about how dinosaurs evolved flight, which you did a lot of the heavy lifting for that episode.
Yeah. And when I got done listening to that, I mean, I was picturing it and I was seeing it. And when I went back to where my center, took my birds, I pulled their wings out and I was like, that's exactly what they're talking about. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think the main thing was we were sort of talking about, we don't know the first bird, like you were saying, or like we were saying. Mm-hmm. It could be Archaeopteryx, it could be Anchiornis, it could be something earlier, but we sort of can see in the skeletal record what needed to happen in their bodies for them to become birds. And it's kind of fun comparing a bird to a dinosaur and seeing how like dinosaurs had some of those characteristics in the very beginning, which would help them evolve flight, but they still need to make some big changes. So like they have hollow bones, as a lot of people describe them. I mean, I'm sure they're not like exactly hollow, but
they're light.
Yeah, they're lightweight, much lighter weight than our bones. And they had the bipedal walking. All the early dinosaurs were bipedal. Later, some of them, their front limbs got longer and they became quadrupedal. So they had the front arms available for something else, like they could evolve into wings. And I think the most interesting thing is the sort of debate about, they call it trees down versus ground up. So the trees down hypothesis is something, did I switch this over a little bit? So that you've got, if you have something like an Anchiornis and it's like running up a tree, and then it's...
Well, that's Archaeopteryx.
Oh yeah, this is Archaeopteryx. And it needs to get to another tree. It might try to like jump to the other tree. And for gliding has evolved, I think I counted over 30 different times in the animal record that we have. Like there's gliding fish, there's gliding squirrels, there's gliding all sorts of stuff. They evolved the ability to sort of like fall from one tree to another. But evolving flight is like a whole other ball game. It requires so much more going into it. So that's only happened 3 times in vertebrates. It's just birds, bats, and pterosaurs, and that's it in like 300 million years. So what they think, the trees down people think, is that like, oh, they were falling from, like tree to tree, and then like their wings got a little bit bigger over time because it was the ones that could fall farther did better. Mm-hmm. So they started getting like bigger wings, and then eventually some of them got a little bit more muscle, and then the ones that could like power their flight a little bit to the next tree were like doing even better. And then eventually like they were flying around the trees, and then they started flying around just everywhere. And then the ground up theory is sort of like, if you imagine something running and trying to jump onto something like a predatory dinosaur, if they could use their wings to sort of give them like a little more boost, then you can more
without
likely catch your prey, I guess, or avoid obstacles or run faster. Maybe use your wings to sort of like tilt
Or
some
even
of them.
get away from predators
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah, that's a good point. It could be an escape mechanism, like jumping off a cliff. That was what they did in the Netflix documentary that came out. What was that called? Prehistoric.
historic planet.
That was the Apple one, but they showed on the
Yeah.
Apple one they had the velociraptors that were going down the cliff.
Yeah, so I guess they both had it. They had an Anchiornis in the Netflix one. The name is escaping me. Life on Our Earth or something. Anyway, Anchiornis got like trapped on the edge of a cliff by a predator, and it just like jumped off and like glid down.
It's like, thank God.
Yeah. And then there's another one that's trees up, kind of, which is basically like modern birds today. You might know this. They have those little like tiny claws on their wings, and they can use those to like scurry up branches. And they think actually what modern baby birds do is they use their wings not for lift but for downforce. So as they run up a branch, they like flap upside down, they like push harder up, and it gives them better grip as they run up steep things. So maybe the wings sort of evolved backwards for like more traction running up. And then, but like, yeah, we just don't really know what happened with them. And yeah, it's just,
and that's what makes them so fascinating, so amazing, because we don't know. We think we know it all, and even when we know it all, we find out something changes.
Yes.
I really like this comment by Mark where he said the beak will inherit the earth when we're talking about it.
Yeah, I was gonna throw that up here. Yeah, and I know a friend of mine, Jason Crean, he talks about like the evolution of flight and how like modern day birds use their wings differently. Some are just to aid in climbing, like you were saying, climbing up a branch. Some fly vertically, short spurts. Some fly, like some species of birds they fly over water and touch land only during breeding season.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
The amount of energy that requires.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Did you want to mention anything about, I know we talked about this, like and don't let me take you off track of anything you want to talk about.
No, it's fine.
But the crocodilians and the relation between.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That's a good idea because we're talking about all the bird connections. But the other big, I guess, when people study dinosaurs, you have to, since non-avian dinosaurs, I should say, when people study non-avian dinosaurs, they have to use modern analogs for a lot of their research because the bones, can't tell you much about behavior. So you look to modern relatives, and birds are the best one because they are dinosaurs. But sometimes they're missing something that dinosaurs had. For example, teeth. There aren't any modern birds with teeth. So if you're trying to figure out how
they use those teeth.
Yeah. And like compare dinosaur teeth to something, you can't use birds. So in those cases, they'll use crocodilians because crocodilians and birds are both in a group called archosaurs. And archosaurs are the group which is basically dinosaurs / birds, crocodilians, and pterosaurs were like the three main contenders in Archosauria. And because they're sort of closely, I guess if birds are the descendants of dinosaurs, then crocodilians are sort of like
cousins.
The cousins are like the nephews and nieces or something. So they're not that closely related, but they have a lot of things in common. So like also if we're looking at their skin, the scales of crocodilians has a lot in common with what a lot of dinosaurs were like.
The scales that have been found anyway.
Yes. And the bite force studies that they do on dinosaurs, a lot of times they'll use crocodilians for those, and some of the musculature as well.
Yeah.
But it's tricky because crocodilians are kind of aquatic and most dinosaurs weren't, although some were.
So a lot of those studies, it'll have birds and crocodilians, and then you kind of decide, okay, some dinosaurs might have been somewhere in between.
Yeah. There's some interesting things too, like with crocodilians. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the sex of the offspring is determined partly by the temperature of the nest.
And it's that way with some birds too.
It is? Okay, I wasn't sure. So that, like obviously that's a great example, because if something's true in birds and it's true in crocodilians, then pretty much every scientist assumes it was probably true in dinosaurs, because it's like you've got the two pieces of the family tree having the shared common ancestor, and if they have that in common, it's probably shared all the way back up. But there's a difference in their chromosomes, right? Because are birds like ZY or something? They're not XY like humans, and then crocodilians have something else. So we don't know. In that kind of situation where there's a difference between the two, then it's like, well, maybe we go with the bird model, but like it only edges out the crocodilian one slightly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's cool because you look at the anatomy of a bird. You've got feathers, you've got the beak, you've got the feet with that look like reptilian feet.
One of the cool examples. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking, we were talking about nests and like the temperatures. Another interesting thing is with the way that dinosaurs had their nests, some of them did it more like a crocodile style, like leave the eggs and sort of bail. And some of them did it more like a bird, or a lot of birds, where they sit on the nest. And one of the ways they figured that out was by looking at the shell chunks in the nest. And like they just studied a bunch of crocodilian and bird nests, and they found that the ones that had a parent nearby tended to have the shells smashed into lots of pieces, because the babies would like hang around there for a while. And it was even as detailed as like concave up versus down, like the way the pieces got flipped around. And it was very consistent between, the amount of parental care. So by looking at crocodilians and looking at birds, they can try to piece together like, oh, that dinosaur nest probably had parental care because of the way that eggs look, or the eggshell fragments look in the nest.
Fascinating. I've never heard that, but that's cool.
It's
yeah, and didn't I hate to bring up Jurassic Park when you guys are so intelligent.
Oh, we bring it up all the time.
We talk about it all the time.
Have you watched it like a million times?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But didn't they try to incorporate that about the sex in Jurassic Park? Remember they found the nest, and I can't remember.
Yeah, I know they also had this trick where they made them all female, and that was pretty clever. But it also seems riskier than making them all male, because it seems like you could spiral out of control with population. But might be easier, right? Because don't we all start out as female, sort of in utero, and then like the male part develops later? Or at least that was what they were saying. That might be the case in birds. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. What else was I going to want to talk about? There was a name for when you were talking about how the wing developed. It started with a P.
Oh, the
protopatagium, that thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you look at the fossils of something like a Archaeopteryx, it'll have its wings, obviously when it's flying, are like straight out, but when it is relaxed, the wings, are like folded down by its side, and this very front leading edge here on the wing, there's a thing called the protopatagium, which is in between, or propatagium, which is in between the arm and the neck. So it's sort of like our lat muscle kind of like equivalent. But these birds, or all birds, I guess, have this muscle, and it's really important, it turns out. So they sort of flex it up and down, and it's like adjusting the leading edge of a wing on an airplane. So it helps to like get this like fine tuning on the amount of lift and how they fly and things like that. And it's just really cool that they found that. Oh yeah, and the important thing is, when the animals die and they fossilize, if they have that muscle, it constricts a little bit and it pulls this arm closer to the head in the fossil. So you can tell if they have like this sort of like pose where they're like yanked into this awkward position, that they probably had that propatagium. And that means that they probably flew, or like are more likely to have been able to fly, or had an ancestor that could fly. So that was just a really recent discovery, that someone was like just looking at bird anatomy. Yeah, exactly. And they're like, wait a second, why are some of them yanked this way and some of them aren't? So that's kind of
Nancy asked if you could spell that.
Yes.
I'm going to type it out.
Oh, okay. PRO PATEGIUM.
TAGIUM.
Oh, TAGIU. I'm sorry.
So the patagium you might be familiar with birds is the big thing. Bats also have it. That sort of is actually mostly bats have it. It's a lot more obvious on bats in between their wing, fingers, hand. I don't even know how to describe what bats have. I guess on their wing, the connection between their fingers is the patagium.
Mm.
It's the skin, wing skin, but then they call it the propatagium because it's in front of the patagium. I think birds have a little bit of a patagium. Is that right? They have
I
a little
don't-
bit of skin.
Right there.
No, on the back side, like because the feathers. Yeah, they got a little skin.
I'm not an expert at bird anatomy, so
Yeah.
yes, at least the ones I'm picturing in my head do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have to get out there and I'll start looking.
Yeah. Well, they're all covered in feathers, so it's so much harder to see that on something like a bat or a pterosaur.
I accidentally read it. It's 2 A's in there, no E.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's PROPA.
A and then
ATA.
TA. Yeah.
Okay. So hope you got that, Nancy.
If you put that into Google, I'm sure it'll autocorrect you.
Yes. Yes. So what other, do you have other little figurines in front of you?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So I brought up all our theropod ones.
like this one the
Oh,
best.
actually, this is
So-
a plushie.
So all birds are theropods, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you define a theropod?
So theropod means beast foot. There's a plushy version of a velociraptor that I really enjoy. And so, yeah, they were named after their feet. The thero part comes from it's the same thing as like therium. There's a lot of like different mammals that are like megatherium and stuff.
That was one.
And that means beast at the end of it. So it's the same root, thero, and then pod, like podiatrist for foot. So they mean beast foot because they were discovered by their feet. That was the original way they defined them. But the main thing that we usually say is they're like the two-legged carnivores mostly. There are some, we don't have any examples in front of us.
No, some of them were herbivores.
Yeah, so
Not many though.
the oviraptorosaurs, so like oviraptor, it looks like an ostrich kind of. So did ornithomimus or gallimimus. Gallimimus is the one in Jurassic Park that's running in a big group, and then
Yes.
they do run in herds. That's the gallimimus. So they're pretty bird-like. Those are theropods, and there are some other interesting ones.
Therizinosaurus.
Yeah, Therizinosaurus.
That's the one with giant claws but it eats plants.
Mhm.
And we just figured out with a recent study figured out that those claws were actually probably too large to help it do much.
Yeah, they might have been too weak. Like the force on the finger might have been too strong. Like if it tried to actually use it as a weapon. But
I wonder if they used it, if they were plant eaters, I wonder if they used it to kind of gather.
yeah,
It could have been, yeah.
yeah, that's one of the leading hypotheses. There was a fun one for a while that maybe they used it like giant salad forks to like scoop up like seaweed. Like they hung out in marshes the whole time scooping. And the earliest, was it Therizinosaurus, where they thought maybe it was a turtle flipper?
I think so. Yeah.
Way back in the day. So yeah, there are some fun interpretations. But yeah, theropods, so it's all the bipedal carnivorous dinosaurs. There's sort of the way the first dinosaurs look too. The very earliest dinosaurs that we have are bipedal, carnivorous. They have sharp teeth, usually serrated teeth. T-Rex is also a theropod.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, they evolved into a much more diverse group of animals.
Yes.
Other than just theropods.
Okay. I just had a question I was going to ask you. Okay. What other figurines do you have?
Oh, yeah. We got this one, which I think is supposed to be.
That's our non-theropod.
Oh, yeah. We should go through theropods first. This is a Carnotaurus. It's got horns on its head, sort of like a bull, which is why it's called Carnotaurus.
Mm-hmm. And it's got even shorter arms than T-Rex.
Yes. See its little arms. So this is a theropod too, but it does not have, it's missing like most of its arm. So this is like mostly upper arm. So it's like mostly like humerus. And then it's like lower arm and wrist bones and everything are all in like this one little spot, and they're all fused together. So it can't even really move its wrist or like even move its fingers. A lot of these are a single bone. So they were really useless arms. Like people think T-Rex arms were useless. T-Rex had a claw that was like half a foot long, and one arm could curl like 150 pounds. So it wasn't that useless. This thing had like the real useless arms.
Yeah. And do you think that's just evolution fading out the?
So people assume that they must not have been using their arms much because they had really awesome mouths. So maybe they're like a dog, where it's like dogs don't need arms for anything. They just use their mouth for everything. And
well, dogs still dig, I suppose, but
yeah, that's true. This was not doing any digging, that's for sure. Maybe some people think the weirdest thing about it is if you could see its skeleton, it's got a huge shoulder blade, way bigger than like most of its relatives. And usually you have this huge shoulder blade for muscle attachments for the arm. So why it had that is anyone's guess. And it also had a really flexible shoulder joint. So my favorite hypothesis is that it could like spin its arm really fast as a like a display for mates.
It was a really funny picture.
Yeah.
That was a prehistoric planet too.
I think it like stretched them out. They didn't go full spinning on it. There's a cartoon too where it's like a bumblebee, and it like flies using its like arm spinning, which is probably not the case, but it's delightful. So yeah, that's Carnotaurus. That one's from the Cretaceous. Most of the like craziest looking dinosaurs are from the Cretaceous, which is the end of the dinosaur time. That's when they had evolved for a long time and really split off into lots of different.
That's when T-Rex was around too.
Yeah, T-Rex. What is this one? Is this Allosaurus? Or maybe this is Acrocanthosaurus actually. Oh no, it's I always say this one wrong, but it's Giganotosaurus or Giganotosaurus,
depending who you ask.
Yes.
You put it up to them.
Yes. It looks a lot like the last one, and it looks a lot like a lot of predatory dinosaurs.
Well, I think its head looks longer and narrower than Carnotaurus.
I guess this is a more normal one. They've got, most of them have 3 claws on their hands. That's typical. So like Allosaurus was like that.
Yeah.
T-Rex is kind of unusual in that it had 2. Carnotaurus actually has 4. It's got like an extra finger, even though they're all useless. It's another way it's weird. So this one is just probably a big predator. This was in mostly South America / Africa, because they were still connected for most of the time dinosaurs were around. That's where a lot of these guys' relatives were. And let's see what else we got. Is this Megalosaurus? Oh, Monolophosaurus. It's just sort of more of the same.
Well, this one's named for the one crest here.
Oh, is this Dilophosaurus? No, Guanlong. I'm not getting any of them right.
Yeah.
So there's a famous dinosaur, Dilophosaurus, which was in Jurassic Park. It was the one that has a big neck frill and spits venom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that neck frill and spitting venom is just for fun. That's not based on anything. But it did have 2 crests on its head, which is what the name Dilophosaurus refers to. This one's called Monolophosaurus because it has 1 crest on its head. And that's about as much thought that went into those names, I guess.
Well, it's a distinguishing feature.
It is a distinguishing feature. That's true. Yeah. So that's Monolophosaurus. It's got an impressive head crest. And then there's Guanlong, which is a lot of dinosaur nerds, one of their favorites, because this is one of the earliest ancestors to T-Rex. And it's sort of shows that, that same general. It's got 3 toes. It's got 3 fingers on its hands. It's small. It's bipedal.
Feathered.
Yep. It had feathers, and it is a carnivore. But, its ancestors obviously got much bigger and much scarier. Or, it's descendants, not its ancestors. It's also got this little tail thing.
Is that a feathered tail?
Yeah. So sometimes they call that like a pygostyle, like they do on birds at the end of the tail, because we've seen that some of these dinosaurs have fused tailbones, just like the pygostyle on the ends of bird tails. And I think there's one, Podipteryx, I believe, that we actually have, like in the fossil, where it's smashed, like the tail is smashed down, and there's impressions of where the feathers were off the tail. So we know that at least that one had it.
And what was that one called again?
This one's guanlong. That's
but the one you were just talking about was
Caudipteryx.
Caudipteryx.
Caudipteryx is another theropod, but it's a oviraptorosaur.
I think so.
So it's related to Oviraptor, is the most famous one in that group, which isn't all that famous, but
it's famous for being misnamed.
Yes,
because it means egg thief. But it turns out it was, when it was found, it was probably protecting its own eggs, not stealing another dinosaur's eggs.
Yep. And that's one, that group has been found with quill knobs on the bone. So like you might know in bird anatomy, the flight feathers go all the way down and connect to the bone. And if the bone fossilizes, you can see those bumps preserved. And with Oviraptorosaurs, some of them have those bumps. So we're pretty sure by comparing them to birds again, that they had big feathers sticking out of their arms. And then some of the, in Mongolia, they just have the best fossils. I think they're the coolest fossils. But they have the Oviraptorosaurs squatting on these nests, and their arms are like in a position where if there were feathers, they would have been covering the eggs, just like how birds do. It's so awesome.
How cool. Man, that is one of my dreams, is just to spend an hour back in that period, because that's probably all I'd live, but just to see it. Yeah. So I had a question. They're not able to determine what color these feathers were, are they?
Yeah,
there are a couple of cases.
There are people that think you can and people that think you can't is part of the answer. But if you can, the easiest ones to tell would be black. So this one is actually colored based on, I think it was colored based on Anchiornis, is my guess.
No, the Archaeopteryx I thought they found in the Melanosome.
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
Well, Microraptor, another theropod, and that one's known for its forewings because it looks like it's got wings on the legs.
So they did a little bit of that on this.
They
put some feathers sort of on its wings, or feathers on its wings, on its legs to make them like wings.
We don't have a Microraptor to show, unfortunately, but you can look in, and this is a relatively new technique, like just in the last 20, 30 years maybe. You can kind of see through a microscope different structures, and then these melanosomes, based on the shape and by comparing them to modern animals, you can figure out like, well, this shape correlates to like the color black. And so that's why they think Microraptor, for example, had this black iridescent color.
Yeah, like a crow. So it's basically under a microscope, these melanosomes, which create melanin, just as similar to how our skin gets its pigment. That's how bird feathers get their pigment. And
we can't tell them for all colors. Black is one, maybe white and gray, and a little bit of orangish.
Yeah, like orangey brown.
So there's a couple of Borealopelta, for example. That's different type of. That's a nodosaur, right?
Yeah, it's like this guy.
It's like this one, but no tail club.
Just hold it like this.
Very big, and bulky, low to the ground kind of thing. And that one they figured out because they had such a good fossil.
There was keratin covering these little armory bumps.
Yeah.
Which happens on alligators too.
So they figured out it was this reddish brown, and that it was actually, was it darker on the top, lighter on the bottom? Is that how it goes? Because it could camouflage then if you're like looking down from above. It kind of blended in.
Or from the side.
Or from the side. It would blend into its surroundings more. And then another one, Anchiornis. That's the first dinosaur where paleontologists figured out the colors. And that one was a mix of...
it was a lot like this, where it was white on the wing, like the primary flight feathers, and then black on the... But it had this
banded tail.
Yes, yeah. They think it had a little more red than this one did.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still a lot of, guesswork, because although a lot of people think we can tell black, we don't have a white. So a lot of the white is like, well, we couldn't find any pigment, so we're just going to guess that it was white.
Right.
And
then other colors, like we may never know about pink, for example, but there might have been some pink dinosaurs.
Yeah, because melanosomes create those colors Sabrina mentioned, black, white,
Gray,
reddish brown. Also a color called penguin, which is sort of a dark gray, but they don't produce any of the bright colors. Those come from different compounds and structures. So yeah, like pink, blues, all those things. Some of them you can get by structural coloring, they call it. So that sort of crow iridescence and stuff. But the problem with that is they tend to have a black undertone. So then even the black might not be right because it might have the structural color modifying it on top of that. So it's sort of a black background underneath a different color. So there's
a lot we don't know.
It's kind of controversial, but we know a little bit, I guess, about their color.
Yeah. So fascinating. What if you had to think back from the I don't know if I want to go through your 9 years of podcasting or through the last year. I guess I want to know, let's just go through what you know about dinosaurs. Like, what are some of the most fascinating things, discoveries? Sorry, that was kind of, I didn't warn you that question was coming.
We've got our favorites.
So my favorite group of dinosaurs are these, they're called ankylosaurs. Ankylosaurus is the most famous one. Maybe I need to get it farther back because this is a larger stuffed version. My sister actually made me a crocheted version of this, so we have somewhere too that I love. Actually, I think this one's supposed to be a Lidopelta because it's got these extra bumps. But anyway, some of these close relatives have huge spikes coming out of the side, like their shoulders, like giant shoulder armor. Other ones like this one have a big club on their tail. And I think they're really cool because there have been a lot of studies on what the tail club's for and how much force it could impart on different things. And one of my favorite scientists is Victoria Arbour. She lives in Canada.
Mm-hmm. She's known as the ankylosaur expert.
Yes. So we've interviewed her several times on our show because I always like talking to her.
Those episodes.
She did the study of how much force could they bash with. And what she found was that if you take a theropod like this and you bash the foot, it would be able to break the leg or the foot. Technically on dinosaur, this is all foot up to here. This is the ankle way up here, which makes it look like, just like with birds, it kind of makes it look like their knees are backwards, but it's not actually their knee, it's their ankle. So she found that it could break their foot. But if a different study found that if it hit it too high, it wouldn't break its leg because the bone is stronger and there's a lot of muscle to sort of dampen it. So there's this interesting thing you can learn about if they were defending themselves, how specifically they would probably target a predator with their weaponry. And
it definitely, it's, if you're the predator, it's not as easy as I've got the big teeth, I've got the advantage. The herbivores also had ways to defend, good ways to defend themselves.
One of the cool things about dinosaurs is, the herbivores were really impressive too. And then the other thing she found recently is that they have a lot of broken armor on their hips here. And what she thinks they did, it sort of matches up with if you took another one of these and backed them up towards each other, that they would bash each other. Like Rock'em Sock'em robots probably competing for mates, and then they damaged each other. So it happens a lot in the animal kingdom. I mean, with birds too, where this structure, even though it looks like, oh, that's a big weapon and they used it to fend off predators, it was probably also, I can grow this big impressive thing, don't you want to mate with me? And also, rival, don't mess with me because I'll bash you with it.
My favorite thing is when we look at, even just in the 9 years that we've been closely looking at dinosaur discoveries, a lot of our understanding has changed. And every new discovery, every new paper kind of builds upon that. And then sometimes there are discoveries that just change everything. And so one example is, and this started off in an early episode for us, is when they found the rest of Dinochirus, because Dinochirus was, I think they found originally in the 1950s. A woman named Sophia, she had a team out in Mongolia.
This arm. They just found a huge arm.
Okay, that's all they found. Yeah, were 2 arms, giant, and they thought this must be some fearsome, terrifying predator. We don't know anything else about it. And that's all we knew for about 50 years. And then through a lot of, I'd say a little bit of luck and kind of tracking things down, another group of scientists was able to find most of the rest of Dinochirus, and they figured it out that it was the same animal. And it was nothing like what you would expect if you were to look at its arms, because the headlines at the time were like, this is the Jar Jar Binks of dinosaurs, because it had, it sounds really goofy looking, and it's got these terrifyingly large arms, but it's got a humpback, it's got hooves, it's got a large gut, it's got, what were the other things?
Its head is more like a duck than it is like a T-Rex.
Yeah. And it turned out it's an herbivore, and it probably didn't have very good defense other than looking large.
And it's extremely impressive claws.
Yes, and it's but it's got this big gut because it needs to process plant material.
Yeah, I should say.
Did you say it had hooves?
Yeah, but hooves is like it basically just like the toes were blunt. Is
Yeah,
what she
that's
means.
true.
Not like it
Not-
still had like regular bird feet basically.
But it was more hoof-like.
Yeah, it didn't have, because pretty much every theropod has these like sharp claws on their feet, just like birds, like it doesn't matter how friendly the bird is, they've got some pretty intense foot claws. And at least I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But this one had like very dull toe claws.
Yeah, so then it's just a reminder of there's so much we still don't know. And even when we make educated hypotheses around it, like we could still be totally on the other end of what was actually going on.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
So is there, go ahead, Garrett.
I was just going to say, when you just scale up one part of an animal, like this arm, into like, they thought it was going to be like 70 feet long, like a 70-foot long T-Rex. And it turned out to just be like a really proportionally weird, super long arm on this very strange animal. And that was, again, that's a theropod. That's one of the examples of the meat eater turned herbivore. So it evolved from big, scary things, but it might not have. Actually, it could have been scary.
Yeah.
But not
It sounds kind of scary. It sounds very interesting. So do scientists get together and really like battle it out? That is incorrect.
Yeah.
That's what I feel.
I'd say not the way that they used to.
One of my favorite quotes was one paleontologist who saw somebody else's work, and his reaction was, "That is a fiction." That's just like what he told the guy, which I just love.
I think though it's a lot of like, that things can change, like our understanding can change, and you just have to go based on what evidence you know at the time.
Yeah. And
so it's very like, sure, it can get heated sometimes, but people know like there's always going to be a debate over this. Versus in the 1870s, and maybe you heard this episode about the Bone Wars. I would say that was a lot less civil. Yeah.
Okay.
As two men as Martian Cope, and they contributed a lot to paleontology. Like I think a big reason why dinosaurs are so popular is because of them and their findings, and they made it really exciting. But they bickered a lot in the scientific papers. They spied on each other's work. There was talk of like, they would destroy each other's fossil finds because they wanted to be the first to name all these dinosaurs and get the glory and everything. And it got kind of nasty, especially at the end. So it's not like that today. It's like, sure, the debates can be heated, but you keep it to what you're talking about. You don't make it personal.
It tends to be pretty civil. I mean, just like in any group of humans, there's always a couple that are more confrontational than others. But yeah, in general, it's kind of a small world too. I remember one paleontologist counted up the number of full-time dinosaur paleontologists, and it was less than 100. So it's a small group. I'm sure like in birding too, if you're in like a niche for, I shouldn't say birding, if you're in conservation, if you're talking about like a specific group of birds, there aren't going to be that many people, and they might have different opinions, but like you kind of have to stay civil because you're going to have to work with them. But yeah.
Okay.
There are some debates.
Bone Wars, and it's because I heard you say in this last episode too, I just used those two names in this episode. What was it? Cope?
Oh, Cope, Edward Cope and
Edward Drinker
sorry,
Cope.
Edward Drinker Cope and
Charles
Othniel Charles O.C. Marsh.
Oh, I got him backwards. Othniel Charles Marsh.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but if you were to just search for Marsh and Cope or the Bone Wars,
Okay.
the most relevant thing now, Othniel Charles Marsh worked at Yale.
Mm-hmm.
His uncle was George Peabody of much fame. And so he was sort of like, it's funny because the part of the feud between them was supposedly that Marsh was like the rich boy, but really Cope was also very rich because scientists in the 1800s, the only way you could be a scientist is if you were pretty rich.
Mm-hmm.
But Marsh was more rich. And so he worked for the Yale Museum or the Yale University, and he went out and found all these dinosaur bones, and they all went back to Yale. So the Peabody Museum, it's called now, Yale Peabody Museum, is where you can find pretty much all the stuff he found, which includes Brontosaurus. Some people consider it Apatosaurus now, but that's the big long neck dinosaur like Land Before Time, Littlefoot, or similar to Brachiosaurus and stuff. And what all else do they have there? I think they might have a Stegosaurus. Was Marsh the Stegosaurus guy?
I think so.
Yeah, but they have a lot of really cool stuff he found. And then for Cope, what ended up happening, his story was a little more sad. He got more vested in the rivalry than Marsh did. And he ended up basically spending all his money trying to like compete with Marsh. And so he ended up being very poor later in life and sold all his collection to the American Museum of Natural History. But that means if you go to the American Museum of Natural History, you'll see all his stuff.
Yep.
So they have, I can't remember. I'm trying to remember which things in the American Museum of Natural History are his finds.
It's sometimes hard to keep track because they named so many dinosaurs that we now consider no longer valid.
Yeah. Because like one of them would name Triceratops, and then like a week later, one of them would name something like Monoclonius or something, just like a different name, but for the same animal. And so
and I think
there was a lot of that happening.
I think more of Marsh's names survived than Cope's.
Yes, they did. But Cope had some good ones too.
He did.
And
well, Cope, the one I think of as the one that didn't survive is the leaping Laelaps. And that's that Charles Knight painted pictures of two theropods, and they're kind of one leaping onto the other on the back. But now we call them, instead of Laelaps, we call them Dryptosaurus. You can see that there's a sculpture of that in New Jersey now.
The New Jersey State Museum at Trenton has that, like the two fossils like fighting skeletons, kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were really important. They found a lot of stuff. They're the reason that people got really interested in dinosaurs, because through their rivalry and trying to like get more press than the other, they sort of like elevated the science through their rivalry. Just like, I mean, people talk about all the time in sports and stuff too. Sometimes the rivals sort of make the story. And
so they've contributed a lot to the field, but they got a little nasty sometimes.
That they did.
Yeah. And you have an episode on
we do.
this?
That was one of our milestone episodes, 250. It's a long one. So
that was all Sabrina, that one.
I don't mind long ones. So 250. Yeah, and you talk about, when you're talking, Sabrina, you often refer back to different episodes, and you're like, that was episode 300. And I was like, how does she know this?
Oh, wow. I have the benefit of being able to look it up.
Well, we've been talking for an hour. I could talk with you hours more. I would love for you guys to come back on a future episode of Coffee with the Critters. Would love to have you. I know a lot of people will watch these replays, and I know today's Super Bowl Sunday. I was like, change Super Bowl Sunday.
Speaking of rivalries.
Right? I can't thank you both enough for coming on. And I wanted to mention as well is how people can find you, your website, iknowdino.com. Dina says, would love to hear more. And all your podcasts are also listed on your website. And you have like the first menu, it says start here. I didn't.
That's okay. We update that from time to time also. Okay.
So for those of you that are watching this and watching this replay, you might want to start there. I'm going to go back and listen to it to see what I'm missing. But 500, well, almost 500 episodes, everybody's got a lot of listening to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and you guys do this full time, right?
Yep.
We do. Yes.
Love it. Love it.
We're living dinosaurs.
So you can find out more about what they do, and you have a merch store on your website. You also have through Patreon, you can join different levels. And is it get more involved?
You can get more involved. We have a whole community. We call them Dino It Alls, so you can chat with them on the Discord. We also offer a lot of bonus content. That's why we say, like, depending how you count it, maybe we have reached 500 episodes.
Yeah, if you include the bonus ones. Yeah, we do once a month. We do something called I Know Paleo, which branches outside of just dinosaurs, because we wanted to talk about more paleontology, but we didn't want to.
There's still so much dinosaur stuff to talk about. So.
It's always too much to include in an episode. It's weird. We thought we would run out, but it's not happening.
Yeah, good, because if you're not running out of things to talk about, we're constantly finding new discoveries. So you can look up their podcast. How I found you is I just entered my podcast app and typed in dinosaurs, and boom, there you were. That was 3 years ago. So they can find you pretty much anywhere they listen to their podcast, right? And you can also find on YouTube, which I have not looked at your YouTube. So when they look for you on YouTube, are you providing visuals as well, or
No,
very little? It's something we want to add in the future, but for now.
The podcast is definitely the better place to go, because also getting it on YouTube is manual, and I'm a little behind by a couple months, whereas the podcast is always up to date. Yeah.
Okay.
But
and
YouTube, if you prefer YouTube, it's there.
Okay. And Instagram. So I need to get on Instagram and follow you there too, just to make sure I don't miss anything.
We are doing something kind of fun. I found a dinosaur related event for every day this month. That's going on Instagram right now.
We're going to do a live stream on February 20th for the 200th anniversary of Megalosaurus.
Yes. Which
was the first named dinosaur. So that's kind of cool. And yeah, she's got a post because of that for every day had something significant happen for February.
I say almost there. Some of them there was like one or two that were a stretch, but I made it work.
I'm amazed that you found, like a calendar in February for dinosaur.
Well, we're going to have to follow you on Instagram now so I can see what you're posting.
She turned into a talking whiteboard on Instagram. This is a literal talking whiteboard thing.
A talking whiteboard, is that what you said?
Oh, yes. I had some fun with some character animation there.
Okay. All right. Well, I got a lot of great information from this. I know I talked to you before the live stream started. I'm going to head to is it called the Peabody Museum in North Carolina?
Oh, in Connecticut.
What's that?
In Connecticut.
Oh, why did I write
There is a museum in North Carolina that one has the Acrocanthosaurus. That might be because we were talking about Acrocanthosaurus earlier.
Yep. Okay. Then I'm headed to Connecticut this spring. I'll just wait for them to open. Yeah. I can't thank you guys enough for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. This was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I will reach out to you again in the future to see if you can come on for another live stream episode. I want to get the feedback from a lot of people. A lot of people are saying it was fun. It was very interesting. And thank you. So for everybody else watching this, I just want to say thank you for attending today. Thank you for your support. Share this live stream with anybody you think that would find this interesting. And don't forget, we have our upcoming events. We have the Parrot Enrichment Workshop, which is half sold out, and that it will be in April. We also have the Understanding Behavior Through Working with Birds, which focuses on the science of behavior and training, but we will not be working with just birds. So keep an eye on that. That one sells out every year. I'll see you guys this Friday. I'll be on with Robin Shawokas Sullivan on the Leather Elves, talking about training for enrichment. That will be this Friday. And oops, I forgot to say, oh, and we have our workshops in a day with the trainer. And I wanted to say, thank you. That's the slide I was trying to get to. So Garret and Sabrina, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.